Hey, welcome to the Cleaning Challenge. My name is Dr. Patrick Garrett, and today I want to talk about a really important concept, which is the basis of my practice, which is the idea of food as medicine. Now, of course, that's not a very new thing. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, "Let medicine be your food and food be your medicine," as well as like Paracelsus, the father of modern pharmacology, said, everything man needs for health and wellness is provided by God and nature. Man's job is to find it. And what we did as a nation in westernized medicine is we found it, isolated individual molecules, synthesized those, and added on something that made it unique, and then patented those and sold them back as drugs. And so of the 900 synthetic drugs that we've created, they all come from something that already worked. And it's usually cheap and easy. And that's the basis of really helping people on the largest scale within America, is just to stop causing the disease and eat your way out of the disease. So that's what we're really going to talk about and focus on today. And these are very important constructs of just the cleaning challenge, but also application that can save your family, your friends, your community, and your church. So let's take a look at the top 9 killers of Americans. You look at things like heart disease, cancer, stroke, all preventable diseases. Accidents, that has nothing to do really with this so much, except for like maybe hormone exhaustion or something. Alzheimer's disease, which is also a side effect of many medications for the first two diseases, and diabetes. And it's interesting, if you look at diabetes and cancer, both of those came from obscurity to now being on the top 10 killers. Something like cancer is slated to take the #1 position, even though heart disease has held that for the last 100 years. So we're going to look at some of these epidemics too, and how we change disease. So conventional wisdom says, in westernized medicine, we've always been kind of epidemic, everybody's dying from these diseases, and we just kind of accept that this is our fate. But what we don't appreciate is the fact that other countries don't have the same disease rates as ours. Something as simple as heart disease, your greatest cure is to fly the heck out of here and go eat and live like somebody else in another country. Because if you look at something like France, they have a cholesterol of 250 and they have 70% less heart attacks and less strokes. You look at something like breast cancer. You can get a 90% reduction by eating and living in the Middle East. And so what they do in those countries, and countries all around the world besides America, is they don't pollute the body as much as we do, and they have a lifestyle that's consistent with life and longevity. So you look at something like heart disease, that's 1 and 2. It's 18 times more lethal now than it was for your great-grandparents. And we're actually seeing 10-year-olds with foam cells, which is the beginning of heart disease. So we're talking about 5 years of eating like an American, and you're starting to get heart disease. And we're seeing bypasses and heart attacks at younger and younger ages now. It used to be 60, 70 years old, you kind of expected that. But now we're seeing quintuple bypasses in 40-year-olds. And that is just completely unacceptable as a population. Now something like diabetes, oh my gosh, diabetes didn't exist in medical textbooks really before 1959. And so that's something that took tens of thousands of years of dietary change to get to the point where we could eat 160 pounds of highly processed sugar in 1 year. And now we went from none to rare to epidemic. And we'll take a look at those numbers. But your risk now of prediabetes to diabetes is 1 to 2. I mean, that's insane. Obesity, 3 out of 4 Americans overweight or obese, and of course 80% of those will become type 2 diabetic. Cancer rates are probably the most just insane ones to look at when we talk about food as medicine and talking about causing these epidemics, right? And so if you look at something like the cancer rates in the early 1900s, it was very rare. And of course it was kind of an ageism disease. You get old enough and eventually you get enough chemical toxicity and you get some cancer. Cancer's always been around. We have found on papyrus paper written documentation about cancer, describing cancer, packed away with mummies and tombs in the deserts. So it's not that we didn't even know what they were or how to describe them, but we went from 1 in 8,000 to 1970s. It hit the top 10 killers. We were going to pour trillions of dollars into figuring out what causes these cancers, and lo and behold, all we figure out is we caused them. We caused them. That's our wisdom. So let's look at something like prostate cancer. And so prostate deaths in the last 28 years, you can see this skyrocket. Now, one of the things that that we talk about within Food is Medicine is this specific type of graph here, and you'll see this over and over. Basically, there's a point in which it didn't exist or is very rare. There was a sudden epidemic, and then we maintain that epidemic. And so while we sit there in this kind of area here and we say, well, it's always been epidemic, if we go back in time, we realize we caused this thing. We made a major change and this occurred. And really, the beginning of prostate, this thing goes back to 1981. But if you go back down to 1940, it would be right here. It would be almost non-existent. And we were able to increase prostate cancers by 400% in 1 year by adding a new pesticide created from extracts of rearrangements of Agent Orange after World War II. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of these chemical toxicities, these increases or explosions of cancer, is really post-World War II in the use of either things like Agent Orange into pesticides and herbicides, or highly estrogenic chemicals, or just taking petroleum and flavoring and coloring and sweetening our food. So back then, there weren't. I mean, it's hard for a lot of doctors to imagine that there weren't specialists in prostate, that there weren't clinics dedicated to prostate, because it just wasn't an issue. We created that. Even heart disease, we said, was #1 killer of Americans even back in the 1900s, and it maintained that mostly. Infection took over a couple times, but as we cleaned things up, that went away. But look at this, very rare, sudden epidemic, maintain that epidemic. Now, the only reason we see a decline here is because we got really good at taking the veins out of your legs and sewing them to your heart, right? Not a problem. Keep eating crap. It's not a problem. When you can't walk or sit without chest pain, we'll just cut the veins out of your leg and sew them on your heart. That's our cure. That's our prevention. And that's the only reason we really see any change in this epidemic, is because of that. We've gotten really good at doing stents and balloon angiographs and bypass surgery. If you look at something like type 2 diabetes, again, this number starts at 1980, and you can see this constant increase in type 2 diabetes. And this is over 30 years. If we go back 30 years before this, it really didn't exist. I mean, we're back down to 0 on this, right? So this is something we created by eating 160 pounds of sugar a year in processed food. You know, something like Cheetos has 7 different ways by which they call sugar. There's 50 different names for sugar that we use in American processed foods. And so it's not a disease. It is not a disease. It is a normal consequence. A normal biological consequence, just like all these other things that we're going to talk about, by living a lifestyle that's just no longer consistent with life and longevity. If I put water in my gas tank in my car, the engine's going to knock. I can call it any disease I want, but the cure is still simple. Stop putting water in your gas tank. And that's what we got to do. Now, this is a beautiful graph, right? Very rare to nothing to that beautiful, beautiful epidemic, right? And diverticulosis, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel, Crohn's, all those are fairly new things after 1950. There were not specialists, there were not clinics dedicated to these things, and this is just purely what we've done to the food. And so all these gut problems are actually some of the easiest things to fix when you change your diet. And, you know, I mean, we see people all the time. For years they've been treated with these drugs, and eventually you can no longer suppress the immune system or do the chemotherapy, and they just chop out that bowel, and you poop in a bag for the rest of your life, right? Diverticulosis is really bad because they tell you stop eating really healthy things. It's the ridiculousness of like kidney stones, where they just don't understand the basic physiology of how that is caused, and they tell you to stop eating the most healthy things in the world. So this is wonderful. Another beautiful one is autoimmune. And autoimmune, you can see it does the same thing here, right? It does the same thing. It has that almost nothing to a sudden epidemic, and we maintain it. And that's one of those things. If you look at Sjogren's, lupus, any of those autoimmunes, 90% of those are always women, right? And it's just the estrogenification of compounds like the just excess amounts that are in dairy naturally, not artificial, not something we did, but naturally occurring estradiols that are in all dairy products. And cheese is worse because it's concentrated hormones. And then if you look at something like the plastics and plasticizers, they're all estrogenic. Most of the pesticides and herbicides are estrogenic. And that high estrogen actually suppresses the T regulation cells, and that then allows you to end up with autoimmune. So that's why 90% of women are going to have autoimmune diseases, or 90% of autoimmune diseases are women. Say that. So why 1984? Again, what did we change in 1984? And this is a really good one. I love the graph, because in 1984 we added aspartame to Coke, the #1 sold soda in 1984. We took gasoline, we formulated it to something that converts to formaldehyde the minute it enters your body, and lo and behold, drinking gasoline and formaldehyde doesn't play so well in your immune system. So instead of like trying to figure out how to shut the immune system off, we should have just stopped feeding people gasoline. But between here, one product to 6,000 products that now have aspartame in them. If you look at just basic gum, oh my gosh. I mean, basic gum is going to have aspartame, neositame, acesulfame. Those are all made from gasoline to sweeten that gum, right? And then the color is gasoline. The flavor is gasoline. It has BHT in there, and that T in that BHT is toluene, which is paint thinner. You can literally go to the store, the hardware store, and buy a bottle of toluene, and it's paint thinner. And what we found is that paint thinner is dirt stinking cheap to preserve your food. Now, all this toxicity saves us 2 calories per stick of gum. We destroy our immune system to save 2 calories. That's America. That's what we do. And this is the best overall graph that we could find. Autism back in 1934 was 1 in 225 million. By 2000, or say 1980s, is like 1 in 2,500. By the 2007, it was 150. 2009, it was 110. And today, it's 1 in 40 for boys. And what this means is if we keep doing what we're doing, we are guaranteeing that every single child born in the United States will have autism. And so it's not a surprise. It is not a surprise. We did this to ourselves. We're causing this. And if you don't think that's shocking, look at the map of obesity and how quickly we change. As these colors get darker, we get fatter. And they had to actually add colors to demonstrate greater obesity than they had ever before. And they actually have added a new category, which is greater than 35. And this is just 23 years of obesity in America. It's not a surprise. It's not a shock. It's a sudden epidemic from what we did to ourselves. So what did we do? Well, this is the This is the best part, right? This is what we do. So when I was a kid, smoking was the worst thing you could do. Inhaling 5,000 toxic chemicals was the worst possible thing you could do for your health. It's guaranteed to give you cancer in about 10 to 20 years from the time you start smoking. Not a surprise, right? If I inhale 5,000 toxic cancer-causing chemicals, I'm going to get cancer and die. Nobody's surprised about that, right? But in 2006, the American diet became the leading cause of preventable death over smoking. It was now more dangerous to eat fast food, processed food, microwavable food, than it was to breathe in 5,000 toxic chemicals. And really, what's the difference? We just take those chemicals and we flavor and color our food with it. We preserve our food. We sweeten our food with it. They're all horribly toxic chemicals. We are the country that every other country has banned chemicals from, and we eat those up. So if you look at something like McDonald's, if you went to a McDonald's in America and you got a strawberry shake, it might be 40 chemicals to make that strawberry flavor, half of which most likely come from gasoline. Now if you go to Europe and you get a strawberry shake from the same restaurant, the same McDonald's, that strawberry flavor comes from, hold it, wait for it, strawberries. Imagine that, right? The bread that we sell as Wonder Bread, if you tried to sell that in Singapore, you could go to jail for 12 years. 12 years and get a $500,000 fine. Other countries don't play. We kill ourselves. So, let's talk about eating our way out of disease. The best thing about eating your way out of disease is that pretty much everything's preventable, right? So we'll talk about studies where 92% of all heart disease and stroke are preventable. Remember, heart disease, stroke, it's the same thing. If you have a clot in your brain, call it a stroke. Clot in your heart, call it a heart attack. Same thing. 80% of all diseases are proven to be preventable and reversible by lifestyle. And of course, 80% of cancers can be prevented and reversed. And what's really cool is the studies show that you can actually reduce or prevent 75% of all cancers, even in chronic smokers. Which again, not a surprise because the food's worse now. And of course, 100% of type 2 diabetes is reversible. So these are your main culprits when it comes to the expense of healthcare, financial bankruptcy due to healthcare, and losing our friends and family prematurely, right? And the problem that we have is that most Americans chronically suffer and die prematurely from easily curable diseases. And it's all just based on what your doctor doesn't know. And that's the unfortunate side. The other thing that we do in the U.S. is we love gimmicks. We love them, right? Oh, it's super complicated why people are sick in the U.S. and not everywhere else in the world. And that's not true, right? Simplicity cures. It is simple. Your body is genetically designed to reverse disease. It is physiologically designed to reverse disease. It is not a complicated thing to fix people. And that's why, like in our clinic, it might take 2 weeks to 2 months to cure 99% of all our patients. It is that easy. But what it isn't is complication. It's not gimmick. And I've chafed against that from many doctors for years. But the proof is in the patients. And so if you look at something like the blue zones, where people regularly live longer, healthier lifespans than anyone else in the world, you know, it's interesting. They don't have all these complicated food rules that we have. They don't eat for their blood type. They don't eat for the metabolic type. You know, if anything, they eat for their butt type. And that's about it. They eat real food, and they have purpose. They get sunlight, some fresh air, and they have some very basic things that keep them together and have a consistency there. But it's interesting that if you look at all the different blue zones in the world, they all have their own different food rules. And so some eat small meals, some eat large meals, some eat late at night, some eat, no breakfast. Some eat breakfast, some eat 2 meals, some eat 8 meals. It's all different. It's all different. And every book that I have on my shelf in my office, which is a lot of them, have food rules that tell you why these people can't be healthy. But they're healthy. They're healthier than us, right? They live longer than us. They have better quality of life than us. And that's a huge difference. And that's the thing that you got to really take home or take to heart when we talk about food as medicine, is that it's not about complication. It's not about, just gimmicky stuff. And that's what I love about the Cleaning Challenge too, is it's just simplicity. Eat real food. Live a lifestyle that's consistent with life and longevity, right? Spend your time with your family. Don't smoke. Eat lots of plant-based foods, things that would decay very quickly. Get a little bit of exercise through purposeful movement, and spend your social time together. That's the main thing. That's the main thing. So we're going to talk about eating your way out of heart disease, balancing cholesterol with food, eating your way out of cancer, and eating your way out of diabetes. And so there's lots. And again, the hardest part of this lecture isn't finding food cures. It's finding, it's limiting the massive amount of information about how food cures. So as we go through this, just know this is just a drop in the bucket, right? And this is why it's so easy. So exceptional wisdom says we can cure with food. And if you look at the Boston University School of Medicine's 2009 study that was published in Prevention, it said there's 5 lifestyle changes you can do that will slash heart disease risk by 92%. And these are not gimmicky. They are not crazy, PX90 kind of things. It's just moderate alcohol. Around a glass a day of wine. And of course, when we talk wine throughout this whole seminar, what we're saying is red wine. Red wine like Merlot, a Malbec, a Cab Sauv. You want a wine that you have to sip. Now, if it's a sangria, no, that's sugar. If it's even a red Moscato, that's just sugar. That's not going to be the same thing. So bad wine or bad alcohol is beer and white wine and sweet wines. Medicinal wine, always remember that's going to be a dark, rich wine. Healthy diet, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, legumes, right? Fish is probably your most powerful anti-heart disease medication that you can ever get, but yet it's the least amount of meat that Americans eat. All the time patients say, well, I just don't like fish. Well, do you like living? Okay. I asked my kid, it's like, and it's not to put anybody down, but it's just like when my kids like, well, eat this. Well, I don't like that. Well, tough luck. Eat it. You have to eat it. It's like your car saying, oh, I don't like gas and oil. Well, tough luck. You're getting gas and oil because that's what you need, right? And so we've gotten this kind of food as pornography kind of mentality these days as Americans, where we say we shouldn't suffer, we shouldn't have any hunger, we shouldn't have any delay in our gratification when it comes to food, and we should just eat for constant pleasure all the time. And that's not the way the body works, right? We have to eat for nourishment. Daily exercise. Now, they put 40 minutes of walking a day, and then about an hour a week of strenuous activity. And what that means is purposeful movement, right? We should be, 24 hours a day, you're talking about 23 hours and 20 minutes a day of doing not exercise, and this little sliver of time of exercising, right? And what's interesting is you look at the Japanese studies on disease reduction, and for every 10 minutes of activity that you do, little bits of exercise, walking to work, walking more, it actually reverses disease by 13%. And so it didn't matter what disease you're talking about, all disease, from anxiety, depression, to irritable bowel, Crohn's, cancer, it didn't matter. It's all the same. Our body is designed to move. And as Americans, we just want to sit, 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 sit. We'd rather push a button than mix anything by hand. But it's the mixing by hand that saves our life. We don't want to do all this work, So then we end up paying a gym money so we could drive to the gym and then walk on a treadmill. How ridiculous is that? But that's what we do. We're just little hamsters. And then healthy body weight, waist size by 85% of your hip size. So if you got a big tummy, you just got to get really big hips. That's my goal. So where do you get a healthy waist to hip size? From the top 3 things. And then, of course, not smoking, right? That's pretty common sense. And so you're only talking really about 4 very practical things. And the other thing about wine to remember as we talk about this is that wine is medicinal more so than just the nutrient properties. One of the reasons that you drink a red wine is because you have to sip it, right? It's dry, it's tart. You can't gulp it down. So you have to sip it. So you slow down. You engage more. You communicate more. You meditate more. And that's the same thing that's true about green tea. Green tea's hot. It should be hot. And you can't drink it. You have to sip it. And it slows you down so you can enjoy that time. And so it even works as a meditative process or a social engagement type of mechanism. Very, very important distinction there. You know, Americans, we just, oh, okay, I drank my wine, gulp. You know, I drank my green tea, gulp. I'm super healthy now. But it's the lifestyle we're after, not just checking the boxes. We're after the lifestyle part. So Harvard looked at this study for second heart attacks. And second heart attacks are worse than first heart attacks because they already lived a horribly crappy life, diet and all that for so long that it ended up destroying the blood vessels in their heart. So most likely they're going to go back to doing the same thing. So in America, the idea is fat causes heart disease. And that is absolutely 100% not true. Okay? The people that consume, or the countries that consume the most healthy fat, they have the least amount of heart disease. And so we looked at a study where just fish twice a week, which really is just minimal fish. I mean, that's bare minimum fish. And lots of fruits and vegetables. Versus just cutting fat out of your diet like an American. And we do it wrong. We're doing it wrong. And of course, who wins? The fish twice a week and lots of fruits and vegetables. That's what the Mediterranean countries do. That's where they have the best heart health, the least amount of heart attacks and strokes. And that's just what they do as a natural diet. And fish is so vital. I mean, we eat 2,000 pounds of food a year as Americans. 160 pounds of that is sugar. 1,000 pounds of that is some type of dairy product, if not milk. That's insane. And if you look at the meat that we eat, of all the meat that will reverse disease, we eat the tiniest amount of disease-reversing food, which is fish. And if you look at just heart disease alone, fish works in 9 different ways to actually prevent clots, break down clots, lower the tension in the blood vessels so you have better blood pressures. It's just incredible. Just incredible. But we're talking wild-caught ocean fish, right? Wild-caught. And so farm-raised is going to actually cause more heart disease, cause more pain. Omega-3s that are from fish, they actually go through COX-2 enzyme and make prostaglandins that are actually anti-inflammatory. That's why 1 can or 6 ounces of tuna is just as effective to prevent clots and heart disease as baby aspirin. And so that's awesome because you're better off eating the fish so then you don't end up with the bleeding disorder. Harvard did another study where they looked at the 4 main ingredients that they felt had the greatest value. And it was nuts, garlic, onions, and of course alcohol. But what kind of alcohol? Red wine alcohol, right? The good stuff. So that's not a surprise. If you look at mirepoix, which is the basis of like French cooking, European cooking, it's diced celery, diced onions, and diced carrots. And you know, you'd always cook that first. You throw a little garlic and onions in there, and then you'd put your food in there. And that's a staple of really healthy cooking, Mediterranean type of cooking. So that's what, I mean, that's an easy thing to implement, and that's why I love that. Now, a few specific things like angina is that just means chest pain, right? And what they found is that you could reverse chest pain simply by removing excess alcohol. And again, it's not red wine alcohol we're talking about. It's all the excessive beer and sweet wines and even probably Boone's Farm, right? Arrhythmias, which is irregular heartbeat. So you might have an extra beat, you might have a skip beat, you might have a dual rhythm like it should be lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. And if you have an extra beat in there, a lot of times it's just coffee. I mean, we drink an insane amount of caffeine as Americans. We have hormone exhaustion because we don't have a lifestyle that maintains that. We exhaust our hormones, we don't eat for our hormones, and eventually, by 35, most people are basically in hormonal bankruptcy at that time. And so caffeine becomes people's crutch. And something like coffee has about 100 to 200 milligrams depending on the brew. And so there's a good book called Caffeinated Out, and it talks about how the same bag of coffee beans can have varying different amounts of caffeine in there. And so think about 200 milligrams of caffeine. Anxiety takes about 350 milligrams of caffeine. A full-on panic attack takes about 500 milligrams of caffeine. And so your green tea is 25 milligrams. Your chocolate and soda is 35 milligrams, which I was very surprised that chocolate and soda. I was very surprised that soda had so little, and that chocolate had the same amount. But then black tea has 50 milligrams. Yerba mate and like Red Bull have about 75 to 85 milligrams for the small one, right? A big monster soda, you're talking about like 160 milligrams to 170 milligrams. And then coffee for one small cup, right? Just a cup, you're talking about 100 to 200 milligrams. Nobody's getting jacked up on green tea, right? Nobody's drinking like 3 cups of green tea and going, I'm crazy, right? But you can get jacked up on coffee and like Red Bulls. In fact, energy drinks, as of last year, send 22,000 young Americans in the prime of their life to the emergency room for chest pain. It's just cost. It's just cost. We live a crappy life. We can't cope. We use legal drugs for it, and then that messes us up. So when it comes to like heart disease or heart attacks, clots are like the big thing, right? Because really, you're just having this clot that travels around, and then it gets lodged in a small blood vessel or a narrow blood vessel, and then the blood stops going forward, that tissue dies, and then you end up with a stroke or heart attack. Now what's cool is, again, we're back to garlic. Garlic is heat stable, is a great clot buster. And so heat stable means that you can cook it, you can eat raw, you can pickle it. It's all good. Garlic is powerful medicine. Powerful medicine. It has 100 bioactive chemicals against virus, parasite, fungus, mold, everything. It's awesome. Now Cornell did a study with Resveratrol, and what they found was that helped break up clots by itself too. Now that you can get from dark grapes. Zhejiang Medical University in China. Imagine this. China doing a study with green tea, touting benefits. Seems suspicious here, right? But they're saying that the green tea tannins or catechins or ECGC in green tea actually blocks platelet clumping or clots as good as aspirin does, or acetylsalicylic acid. So what that means is you're better off drinking a cup of green tea a day than taking that 81 milligram of aspirin, because green tea isn't going to shut off mucus production to allow your acid to eat your stomach, and then you end up hitting a blood vessel, you start bleeding out, and then of course you can't clot because the aspirin blocks the clotting mechanism too. You probably don't feel as much pain because it also is a pain reliever, and then you end up bleeding to death, right? Or just becoming very, very lethargic or tired, chronically fatigued. Right? That's the side effect. Aspirin saves 10,000 lives a year, but it kills 14,000 lives a year because of its side effects. Green tea is only beneficial. Green tea is awesome, right? 3 to 5 cups of green tea, women have a 50% reduction in heart disease rates. That's huge. That's one drink. One drink has that kind of effect on our heart. So that's very powerful medicine. And the Swedish studies, and I think like the Swedish chef from the Muppets, I think, he's always putting stuff in that pot. It's fruits and vegetables, right? Fruits and vegetables lower fibrinogen, which lowers clotting. And so a diet rich of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens, not only powerful phytonutrients, but also anti-heart disease, anti-stroke medicine. Now, whoever thought, people in Italy would have hypertension, but apparently there's someone that does, right? Oh, it's too beautiful, right? I don't know about that. All right, so they did this study on hypertension in Naples where they asked the participants to just incorporate a high potassium food in their diet, right? So all they're doing is adding a food. That's all they're changing, add a food. And what they found was that after a year of increasing potassium-rich foods, 81% were able to either go off their medicine or cut it in half. That's awesome, one thing, right? And then 38% were able to get rid of their meds completely. That's incredible to me. And what they were showing is that it's not a salt problem, it's a potassium problem, it's a water problem. And so we end up reversing disease with just a very basic food. And don't get me started on cholesterol. There's a nice little talk called The Cholesterol Myth that I've done, and I'm pretty sure it's online too. That's a whole long discussion here. The short answer is it's a big myth, okay? So don't buy into that. In the U.S., we want to lower cholesterol. Russia is the only other country that really lowers cholesterol, and we have the highest heart disease rates with the lowest cholesterol. Countries that have the highest cholesterol rates have the lowest heart attack rates. Now 70% of the Americans that end up in the ER for heart disease or heart attack actually have below 200 cholesterol. In fact, if it gets even worse, for every person over 300 milligrams of cholesterol that has a heart attack, there's equal number under 200. It means nothing. You only harm the body by lowering cholesterol, especially through statin pathways, which is, we'll talk about in the cholesterol myth, right? It's only harmful. No benefit. No reduction in disease. And they used to say it on the statin commercials that lowering cholesterol has never been tied to reducing heart attacks. But they made you feel like it does. Your doctor believes it does. He doesn't watch the ticker on the bottom of the commercial that warns him that, hey, we just lied to you, right? We just misled your patients. So, it's not about lowering cholesterol, but what it is about is balancing cholesterol. We want healthy, good cholesterol. Man, cholesterol is your anti-aging hormone. It's vitamin D. It's 80% of your brain, 20% of every cell in your body. It's your cortisol. It's your testosterone. It's your progesterone. It's your estrogen. It's everything that makes you feel healthy and happy as a human. You can't lower that. It's ridiculous. We lower cholesterol and then lower testosterone, which is cholesterol, and then say, oh my God, did you know there's this epidemic of low T? Oh, we'll take a synthetic chemical and give it back to you. And then the next commercial is, oh, if you suffered a heart attack from taking synthetic testosterone, call our law office, right? It's ridiculous. We have this terrible cycle that happens that can just be improved by food. So foods that help, again, are just fiber-rich foods, nutrient-dense foods. So you're back to your oats and your apples and your carrots, and olive oil, avocado, beans, And in fact, the most beneficial thing that you can eat to really balance cholesterol is beans. And what's even better, beans are super cheap. They're super cheap. You can get them anywhere. They're fast acting. They're awesome. And they raise HDLs and they prevent the oxidation of cholesterol. And there is no bad cholesterol. They're lying to you. There is no bad cholesterol. LDL type A actually prevents heart disease. But most doctors don't even know that. It's just, what are we going to do to prescribe a drug today? That's it, right? And so the goal is to raise HDLs, it's to prevent oxidation, and beans are awesome at that. The darker, richer colors, the more beneficial it is. And the only bean that is like you don't have to soak is lentils. Lentils, you know, you put them in, and by the time it's done, they're actually soaked through and they're fine, right? The rest of the beans, if you buy them dry, you have to soak them. Soak them, change the water 2-3 times. Put that water in plants because the saponins protect the plants. And saponins is like soap. So if you open a can of beans from a can, you'll notice there's some suds on the top, right? I used to think, well, maybe they're washing the cans out with soap or something. But it's just soap from the plant, from the bean, saponins. That bothers some people, so wash it off. Phytic acid ends up causing problems with some people, not all people. So for those people, again, soak them, sprout them, get more nutrition, 300% more nutrition if you sprout these beans and then cook them. But again, start where you can, where you feel comfortable. Do it cheap and easy and get a little bit more complicated as you go. Now, one problem that you do find on the cholesterol test that is actually problematic is triglycerides. A lot of times doctors will tell you that triglycerides are like a measurement of fat, and they must have failed biochemistry, because it's actually a measure of conversion to sugar, right? And sugar to fat. And so what that means is you eat a high carbohydrate diet of refined carbs, and that has to convert to sugar very quickly. So all carbohydrates are sugar bound to oxygen, bound to sugar, bound to oxygen, bound to sugar, bound to oxygen. So that whole loaf of bread is just sugar at the end, right? And so if you don't eat fiber-rich foods, it's just instant sugar, and then it has to convert to fat. And so that sugar binds to a glycerol, or sorry, that glycerol binds to 3 fatty acids, and then it converts it to fat. If triglycerides are high, it means you're eating so much sugar you can't convert it to fat fast enough, and it's waiting in the blood for that conversion. And so that means high sugar diet, which is not a surprise. That's America, right? Refined sugars, 160 pounds a year. Refined flours, fruit juices, dried fruit, and excessive alcohol. And again, what kind of alcohol we're talking about? Sugar alcohol, right? Beer and crap wine. So that's if you get a cholesterol about 30, 35, that's like a vegetarian. Yeah, not a sugartarian, a vegetarian, like a real vegetarian, healthy vegetarian. If you have a triglyceride about 70, that's a healthy diet. If you have it 300, yeah, you're just like an American. So it's going to like screw up your pancreas, get pancreatitis, get pancreatic cancer, and then you get pancreatic death. So what about cancer? Yeah, cancer is a good one, right? We said cancer went from 1 in 8,000 to 1970 it hit the top 10 killers of Americans, to really taking over as #1 after 2010. So it went from obscurity to an insane epidemic in America. So what causes it? Is it lifestyle? Yeah, it is lifestyle, right? And if you look at these, diet is the biggest chunk. Tobacco, which is just lifestyle, that's the easy one to cure, right? And then we'll go this way. We have radiation. So again, should I get a mammogram or should I not? Should I cause cancer? Should I not? Am I detecting or causing? What am I doing? And so radiation becomes a big problem there, right? Alcohol, which is beer, right? White wine, not red wine, is going to increase cancer in some patients, right? They actually will tell women not to drink red wine because alcohol increases breast cancer, but red wine prevents breast cancer. So it's the sugar wine. It's the sugar beer. It's the mixed drinks that cause it. Occupational factors, which is basically means we use a bunch of chemical toxins in your work environment and you die from it, right? New carpeting emits formaldehyde for up to 4 years after you install it. So think about that next time the baby's crawling on the floor, right? It's very frustrating. Viruses cause 7%, But that really just means suppressed immune systems. That's like HPV or those kind of things. So that is, again, 85% of HPV is reversed just by your body's immune system. And so if you have 77% from viruses, that's immunocompromised people. And then other is all the other wonderful things, that all the gasoline stuff that we add to all these chemicals in our environment, the gasoline in our lotion, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, sunlight here has a nice little chunk, right? So that's about 10%. But the reality is that the sun does not cause cancer. If it does cause cancer, apparently the sun hates America, and only within the last 40 years. The truth about that is the sun does not cause cancer, right? In 1940s, which again is our trigger years, we took gasoline and we took benzene, which is again just another name for gasoline, and we actually put it in lotions, and all of a sudden we saw an increase of skin cancer. And then they said, oh my God, we got a lot of cancer. Let's use an even more toxic chemical in the lotion. And then they put another one in there that caused more cancer. And then another one, more cancer, another one. And by that time it's epidemic, and we keep doing the same thing. So it's maintained the epidemic status there, right? We fight genetic mutation every single day. Something as simple as the fiber in your food binds to the 80% of the sugar in your food. It feeds the gut bacteria as prebiotics or fructooligosaccharides, and they produce butyrate, and butyrate goes to your DNA polymerase, and your DNA polymerase edits out mutations in your DNA so you don't have cancer, so you don't have disease. That's what we do every single day. And so if we get cancer, it isn't from the damage, it's because our immune system doesn't protect us. It's not reversing the disease. Or we have too much chemical toxicity, which is like copper tone, right? So it's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. So, you know, the other thing is we don't eat foods that are actually natural sun blockers or skin protectors. Think about if you fed a baby too many carrots, the skin turns orange. The reason it turns orange is because all those antioxidant beta carotenes from yellow, green, and orange foods all go to your skin to help protect it from damage. It's natural suntan lotion. Coconut oil does it too. When you eat coconut oil, it creates a protective barrier for the skin. That's the way we're designed. But Americans, we don't do that, right? The National Cancer Institute, they said if you eat more fruits and vegetables, you'll have less cancer. It's a miracle, right? They actually said that, but now this is back in the 80s, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, the 5-a-day campaign. So that's only 5 handfuls a day, right? That's one large apple, 1 large banana, and a half of like a pear or something, right? But it actually would decrease cancer by 75%, even in smokers. Even in smokers. That's a pretty bold statement. Now the number is 13 servings of fruits and vegetables, right? It keeps going up. So this one, you look in the middle of the circle, it's 10. Now it's 13, right? And so as we've destroyed the nutrition, we just have to eat more. But again, that's not much. If we have 3 sides on our plate of fruits and vegetables, and then we have a couple snacks, you got all that you need to reverse virtually all cancers. So it's not like excessive to prevent or cure cancer. It's just a will to do it. That's all it is. If you look at the anti-cancer diet, not a surprise. The darkest, richest, nutrient-dense foods that we have. Lots of vegetables, garlic, big time, cabbage, soybean, but non-GMO soybeans, right? Onions, carrots, tomatoes. Well, let's see, onions and tomatoes, that's like marinara, right? Throw some garlic, I think that is marinara. So we can eat some marinara, we can put some tofu in there, and then you're all good, right? Yellow and green foods have really powerful anti-cancer molecules in it. Fruit, especially citrus fruit, has like limonoids and limonoids that actually are powerful anti-cancer medicines. Fatty fish, but we're talking wild-caught fatty fish. You know, things like Alaskan salmon and tuna that's not from the Pacific now because we radiated it with cesium. Thank you, Fukushima. And of course, green tea's back on our radar again, right? Women that drink about 5 cups of green tea have virtually no cancer. So then we contrast that with what's the encouraged cancer diet? Ah, well, there you go. It's the backyard barbecue. Get us some meat, bunch of red meat, get a high-fat foods, and again, not healthy omega-3 fats, but corn fat, vegetable fat. So we deep fry some stuff, right? And then we drink a bunch of beer. And then we complain about how much disease is genetic, right? That's our backyard barbecue. And of course, that's not surprising then. That's what we eat. If you look at the anti-cancer diet, that's even better because it's more concentrated nutrients. And so seafood, we're not talking about crabs and shellfish and shrimp because those are just bottom feeders. They clean up the toxicity of the world. But we're talking about sea fish at this point, right? Our salmon, tuna, halibut, mackerel, sardines. Back to garlic again. Cruciferous vegetables. So what we're thinking here is what's called brassicas. The brassicas are like the crunchy vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables. So bok choy, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, even watercress is considered a brassica. And then collard greens, really dark, rich greens. So that's the most powerful of the powerful fruits and vegetables for that. National Cancer Institute looked at anti-cancer diet, and again, no big surprise here. Fruits, vegetables, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes. Basically, it's soup and salad, right? Soup and salad for everyone. Minnesota, University of Minnesota looked at special foods for special types of cancer. And again, don't get crazy about this because it's all the same stuff. It's always the same stuff. And that's why reversing disease, no matter what that disease is usually pretty simple to do because it's the same basic foods. And so we're back to those dark leafy greens. We're back to those brightly colored flavonoid dense foods. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and berries. So that leads us to diabetes. And of course over here you see, oh man, if we buy this gallon of soda, they're going to donate $1 to the Juvenile Diabetic Research Fund. We're going to find a cure 1 gallon of soda at a time, people. We can do this thing, right? If we could just find the cure of the diabetes from drinking all the soda. Wait a second. That doesn't work out. You know what's really messed up is there's actually schools and places that do Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme donuts fundraisers to help raise money for the Diabetic Research Fund. It's just terrible. We have a rec center in our town where they have these little games for the kids, and you see these little 4- and 5-year-olds walking around with 2 liters of soda for winning some little bullcrap contest, right? That's insane that we do that to ourselves. And a 2 liter is just a super big gulp. So some people will be drinking a lot of 2 liters. So what does it cost to be fat? Well, you know, people always talk about, oh, I can't afford to be healthy. Man, you can't afford to be fat. It's $4,800 extra just to be extra big, right? Just being overweight costs you almost $5,000 a year. And then if you take that to diabetes, it's almost $12,000 a year extra, right? Let alone you're going to lose your eyes and toes and fingers and knees and hips and kidneys and heart, you know. You're going to lose it all to diabetes. Nobody dies of diabetes. They die of chopping stuff out because everything died. $12,000. $12,000 minimum, right? And so who becomes diabetic? Well, if you're overweight, basically, or say obese, 80% of those will become diabetic. 80% will become diabetic. That's why the risk of diabetes to prediabetes is 1 in 2 in America. 3 out of 4 are overweight or obese. So we're all going to have diabetes. Well, no. They will. You won't. Right? If you look at the 6 factors that you have to predict diabetes, low good cholesterol, high triglycerides, which we said equals sugar, high sugar diet, which then eventually the last thing you usually see is high glucose in your blood, but hypertension, obesity, and then chronic inflammatory markers like homocysteine and cardio-CRP, right? Those are the things. If you have 3 out of 6, you can guarantee that you're pre-diabetic and you're going to have diabetes within 3 to 5 years. So it all comes down to this basic chart when we're talking about eating ourselves out of diabetes, or eating ourselves into diabetes. And it's not rocket science when we look at the next slide, right? When we eat things that are low glycemic, our blood sugar rises just a little bit over time, and then it lowers and becomes normal. When we eat like Americans, we jack it up like crazy, we overproduce insulin, we get reactive hypoglycemia, and then we use epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol to raise blood sugar back up without blood sugar, which means lots of anxiety, lots of panic attacks, and of course depression that goes along with that, just from what we eat. So think about this, okay? Let's see, American kind of breakfast. We eat cereal, which is sugar. There's sugar in the cereal probably. We drink milk with it, which is sugar. We eat toast, which is sugar. There's jelly on the toast, which is sugar. And then we top it off with some orange juice without fiber, which is just sugar. So we eat sugar, 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 sugar. Go America. We overproduce insulin. We crash. Anybody that talks about they have hypoglycemia, usually it's just secondary to hyperglycemia. It's just our diet. It's the cure for hyper and hypo are the same thing. And so we end up crashing. You do that long enough, you end up with insulin desensitivity, then it backs sugar up, then you have hyperglycemia, you have a high A1C, and then we become type 2 diabetic. Go America, right? So let's look at the simplicity of this. If you look at the GI index, it becomes very easy to figure out what's going on. If you look at low, this is going to be stuff that reverses reverses obesity, diabetes. This is stuff that is moderate, that will just slow it down. And then high glycemic foods are foods that are going to guarantee that you become diabetic. Bagels, chips, mashed potatoes, Cheerios, puffed wheat, right? Donuts, French fries, white bread. That's racist. Jelly beans, pretzels, rice cakes. Rice cakes is so funny to see on here because that's what my sisters used to eat back in the 80s to try to lose weight. So it's funny. Mashed potatoes, but instant mashed potatoes, right? Cornflakes, baked potatoes, instant rice, French bread. I mean, it's not a surprise. That's America. That's what we do. If you look at all these things, these are fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and they're all low glycemic. What's really interesting is if you eat old-fashioned porridge, right, steel cut oat kind of thing, it's low glycemic. That's why Grandpa and Grandma could eat oats and not get obese. But if we eat instant oats, that's just sugar. If you look at rice, long grain rice is low glycemic. But if you look over here, instant rice is pure sugar. The way that we get our cooking time down is by destroying the nutrition in the food, which basically guarantees it's just sugar. And that's the messed up thing, is that we have taken real food and just made it convenient, and that convenience kills us. Now there's a good book called Rick Gallops' Low GI Diet, and you can buy it for like a penny off Amazon. And just buy the small one because the recipe book has got bad recipes in it. But you can look at that and look through that high glycemic and low and moderate, and it becomes very apparent why we have diabetes and how easy it is to eat your way out of diabetes. And this, I guarantee you, is something that diabetic educators disagree with, and they are absolutely wrong on the biochemistry of this, right? Well, you don't eat sweet fruits and vegetables because they're sugar. But what they don't know is that the way it works is that 80% of the sugar in the fruits will bind to the fiber, and that goes to your gut. You don't digest that. It doesn't go in your bloodstream. It goes to feed your good bacteria to prevent you from having cancer and to make B vitamins so you feel super healthy and happy all the time. So they're wrong about that. You can eat your way out of diabetes by eating low glycemic foods. The main thing, especially with the congruence of like the cleaning challenge, is to just stop chronically managing chronic conditions that are easily cured by diet. Because this is what we end up with. He's just managing his type 2 diabetes with insulin. Eat whatever the hell you want to eat and just take more insulin. That's the American way. That's westernized medicine. That's jacked up. That's wrong. So we want to eat food as medicine. We want the power of all those phytonutrients, flavonoids, phytosterols, vitamins, minerals, trace elements. We want all that to heal us, and it's very simple and should be fairly inexpensive for us. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than medication, I'll tell you that. It's a lot cheaper than being fat. It's a lot cheaper than being diabetic. It's a lot cheaper than having cancer. It's a lot cheaper than having a heart attack. And for guys, oh man, guys, we're always going to die sometime, right? But you're lucky in America if you die. You're lucky. What you're going to do is you're going to lose a leg, and then you're going to be crippled, and then you're going to have to suck down all your savings that you worked for, and you're going to have to live in a nursing home when you're in your 40s or 50s, having someone else take care of you and being a burden. That's what you should fear. You should fear that, not dying. Fear having a stroke and you can't talk anymore. That's the reality of what you see in clinical practice if people don't make these changes. And so all the guys, not so much women, are waiting for this just mess to happen so they can have that 13th hour savior. But it's not going to happen. You have to take charge now. You have to do this now. You have to do this with your kids. You have to be a living example that shows your kids how to eat, and they will mimic you in that process. Doesn't mean they don't want sweets. Doesn't mean you don't want sweets. But your bulk of your diet has to be reversing and curative. Well, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear your feedback. Again, if you're in the cleaning challenge, stick to it. You can do it. You can do it. That food is medicine. Powerful, powerful medicine. Well, thank you guys.